than I've watched probably in about 2 years.
Wow.
But
we're doing a show
after
I said we're not doing a show till Saturday. Now we're doing a show because I finished some work early.
And we kind of have to, because the news that just came out, at least publicly, Mike Johnson reported that Cody Rhodes has signed with WWE, according to multiple sources. And
wasn't it obvious? I've been saying this all along. I mean, I didn't know he had, as far as like put pen to paper.
Right.
But I mean, he's on WrestleMania. He's against Seth Rollins.
You've been saying he's in the books for weeks now.
For weeks. I mean, he's been there. It's been from day one, other than that one period where it was like, remember there's about a week period where it kind of like got shaky?
Yeah.
But that was cleared up pretty quick. I mean, but aside from that, I mean, that's been the idea since, the day he made that statement and Tony Khan made that statement that he was moving on. WWE was the place he was going. And I think, I don't know the introduction. I think it's going to be like the Hardys when they went to
the surprise
at Mania, but maybe they'll announce it the night before to, spice up last minute interest. I don't, they'll do it the way they do it. But yeah, I mean, he's always been going there. When people there's always the chance he could come back and all that. But like, I was always like, when this Ring of Honor thing was, it's like, no, that's got nothing to do with this. He's, he got a great offer, and that's where he went, and that was the deal. And he thought it was time to leave. And it's in some ways for him, I think it's the best thing for him. That could be really stupid because it's WWE, and there's a track record there. But for him, the idea of being gone for 3 years or more and coming back is much better than being there for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
Even if unless the whole WWE thing flops, and if he does great in WWE, then he doesn't need to leave. I don't know that he will, and I don't know that he won't. I know he can be great there. It's just a question of the guy in charge, and the guy in charge makes his picks, and there's all kinds of aspects of ways of looking at it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't believe that they're going to bury him out of revenge, but there is the thing of, if they do bury him, they pretty much like seal the deal with almost all the guys that are young and good, and going like, they buried Cody. You know what I mean? So that's the last thing you would want to do. But sometimes, that big picture knowledge. I mean, I guess we'll find out. Does Bruce and Vince understand that big picture knowledge? And in theory, you would think it's simple, but there's a lot of simple stuff that, again, I hate to say this because, I'm the same age as Bruce and everything, but, chronologically, but we were very different ages. If you follow, and again, like, if I was one of those guys still, in the 80s, you know what I mean? It's like, I would look at it very differently than I look at it now. And because of that, when I look at it, if I try to put myself as 62-year-old Dave in the 80s, I might go and bury him to prove that we're better. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Which is, and I don't rule that out either. So yeah. So it's gonna be a very interesting thing.
Have you tabbed when you think that he put pen to paper? Mike says he thinks about 10 to 14 days ago.
I didn't know pen to paper. I just know that, it was a done deal, that it's been a done deal. It's on the books. So, as far as the verbal agreement, when was the first time I told you about that? Weeks and weeks ago, right? At least a month. But but there was a snag for some days. So, as far as when they worked it out, I'm trying to think when I first heard that it was worked out. It would have been...
Whenever we talked to Danielson, I think is when you had mentioned that there was a snag, or it was like right around that time.
Yeah. It's interesting because he thought he was very suspicious of him leaving, and they're friends.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because he said it didn't add up. But you know what? To me, it didn't add up at first, but in time, when I got a message from Cody, who wouldn't tell me anything, and he's not going to, because I'm like the one person that he wouldn't want to know. Mm-hmm. But he wrote something to me about the situation, which was nothing bad about anybody. It was the line of it's time to leave the territory. I totally understood as soon as he said that. I go, you know what? I get it now. I mean, and I do. I completely get it. It was just time to make that move for him. Is he going to like it? I mean, he had a lot of pull in the other company, and maybe they want to groom him for something. Maybe, there's a million different things. Maybe there's going to be opportunities from NBC Universal for him now that he's got his thing. And again, like Go Big Show and everything, if that show gets renewed, he can still do that show. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that again, I don't know 100% because I don't know the contract, but I would be pretty sure he would work that into the contract, that there's the things that he already had deals with, kind of like Ray did, where if it's a previous deal, I can still do it, as opposed to like new deals, obviously Vince would have to approve, which sort of sucks if you want to be an actor and you're in WWE.
Yeah.
Because, and that is a negative, where with Tony, I mean, he would just be able to go like, hey, I got this gig, it's really good. And Tony would go, sure, unless it's like the week before a pay-per-view that, you're booked into something big. But, so it's interesting. I mean, and also in AEW, he was guaranteed to be a player. It's like he was always going to be a player. In WWE, there's no guarantees. So it'll be fun to watch.
What do you think about the idea of having him debut at WrestleMania rather than building to something for WrestleMania?
You know what? I would do it the week before because I just think it's like that. You want that last minute boost. Mm-hmm. You've already announced Austin. I don't know what Vince in the corner, if that ends up being the thing tonight or next week with McAfee, because again, the Vince thing's been changing every week anyway. I don't know how big that, like if it's Vince in a match, even Vince in a match against McAfee, I really don't think is that big because I think people just, they know he's old and everything.
How much of that depends on how he feels he looks?
100%.
Oh,
don't you think? Well, no, it's not how he looks. Okay. More how he can move than how he looks. But yeah, I mean, the combination of what he feels like would be proper for him to do. And he can be, he is like the anti-old guy thing, even though he's old. And, not like before, not like now you're dead at 40, which was the old mentality. Now everyone's over 40 there because time stood still, and he still thinks these guys are young now, that are 45. But, and which is actually, as you get older, that actually is what happens. I can tell you, your perspective changes. but Vince is still the anti-old guy thing. If you look old on television, he's not really going to want you there. And I think that, he's tried to take himself off many times. He kind of gets sucked back because it's an easy crutch. And, the reality is that Vince being back on TV with Austin Theory, it did not help ratings. I mean, maybe week one, and even then, not that much. It's like it wasn't like the past, and it's not going to be anymore. I think that well is, I wouldn't say dry, but they've gone to that well too often, way too often. And I don't think that that's going to be that big of a thing, but we'll see. But and then the Austin thing, it's out. Okay, that was the big one. I think that you want one more big one for the week of the show. You could do the surprise, get the surprise pop.
Has anyone seen? I know Austin did the launch of the beer recently, but has anyone seen what he physically looks like?
Didn't he do that promo in the
the promo? But I guess I couldn't really tell.
He looked kind of big to me.
Yeah,
he'll be big. He'll be fine. I mean,
but not like wrestle without a shirt. Big? Do you think?
I don't know. It's tough at that age.
Yeah,
it's not impossible. But it's tough. Sometimes when you get older, I find it much easier to diet at that age. I found it much easier to diet than when I was in my 30s.
Interesting.
Yes, much easier.
Just because you have a better understanding, or?
Yeah. I mean, it's not like, when you're younger, you just think you just want to do everything. And when you're older,
Yeah, plus you're going out doing more stuff probably, especially if you're single. It's probably.
Oh yeah. When I was younger, I was eating at restaurants constantly, right? And when I was in my 50s, I didn't, and now I'm back eating at restaurants constantly. So now it's hard. It's really hard now. Yeah.
All right, so another piece of news that dropped today, and this has been like Tony Khan's place to drop information, is on that Busted Open show. He mentioned the thing about going head to head with Rampage and that pay-per-view, but then they also announced a match with the Briscoes against FTR for WrestleMania weekend, which is I think a lot of people have been anticipating that one.
Yeah. I know. It's interesting because I'm wondering if FTR wins the Ring of Honor Tag Team titles, because I'm thinking that this show is going to be like the guys that he wants beating the guys that he doesn't want, or not necessarily doesn't want, but that he doesn't want as champions. I think is going to be the theme. So we could do a thing like where FTR is AAA and Ring of Honor Tag Team champions, so they you know what I mean? So you've got two sets of tag team champions to defend on that television show. So which actually I think is a pretty good idea, So yeah, I could see that if the Briscoes, if the Briscoes win, then obviously he's going to keep the Briscoes for sure. I mean, even if the Briscoes lose, he might keep the Briscoes. We'll have to wait and see. I don't know what the whole mentality is. And, he said like they're going to do a weekly show, but he didn't know where it was going to air, which was interesting. So, because I think that if it was going to be Sinclair, he can say that.
Right. The exact quote was, "It's also a transitional show before I will relaunch what I hope to be a really great new Ring of Honor television product, a weekly series wherever it does air or stream." So, right. I mean, he said everything and then he said nothing at the same time with that comment.
Well, he may not have the deals.
Right. I wonder, like, because a lot of people are trying to figure out what the product would be. Is it going to be a top-notch AEW, WWE level television show, or is it going to be something more secondary? And the thing that I have a hard time...
Why would he wait? Seriously, why, if you're Tony Khan, will you waste your time doing secondary anything?
That's the thing that I cannot fathom.
I mean, it's either you're going to do it for it to be great or don't do it, okay? I mean, I would scream that one. If your goal is to do what Ring of Honor did with a low production, don't do it. If you have like an idea that you can somehow work this stuff to be major league because you did it once before and it would be a similar product, or you just want to keep it alive to do a feud, and do that, fine. But I mean, the thing is like, if anyone is good enough to be beneficial on an AEW pay-per-view show that he has under contract, they should be on an AEW pay-per-view show. He should not water down to have two different pay-per-view brands. Okay. I mean, to me, his goal should be blow away pay-per-views, which he's done the last three. Mm-hmm. And that should be the goal, is blow away pay-per-view shows. And if somebody's really good, and I mean, it's not so much good. He's got a million good wrestlers. But if they are charismatic enough to be on the show, because now he's going to be picking and choosing. You're going to always, like for this next pay-per-view and the pay-per-view after, you're going to have great wrestlers who don't make the pay-per-view show just because there's just, even in a 4.5 hour show or a 5 hour show. The last one was a 5 hour show. And you could still put all kinds of great matches together with guys that weren't even on the show, even though he did get, at the end, he did get Pac and Pentagon and those guys on in that 6-man at the end. But still, I mean, I can still go with, Santana and Ortiz. And, there's so many guys. And they're really good that are out there that, whatever. Yeah.
So I guess the other thing now, I can't put myself in his shoes, obviously, but if he believes he is a hit maker with wrestling and that they've had a great run so very early on, I wonder if he believes he could also turn this into a new television show, get the money from that television show, whether or not Thursday nights are open or whatever it is. But can this become another piece of their business plan in the same way that AEW runs the company? It makes money. Could you fathom him being able to? I mean, we're already at the point of where there's way too much wrestling on TV.
That's one of the problems. Is there's too many hours, and adding hours is not good. That's why, realistically, if you're asking why Ring of Honor went down and why Impact's numbers have gone down so much, it's because people have enough hours of wrestling and they don't need to watch more. And New Japan's another one. New Japan on Thursday, their numbers are terrible. And, a couple of years ago, their numbers were great. So the reality is great for the station. So the reality is that people, between, even Rampage isn't knocking them dead. You know what I mean? The time slot does well in its time slot and all that, but it's not like it's knocking them dead. The reality is and NXT isn't either. The reality is there's more than enough wrestling on television right now. And, that's another thing. That's another reason why I'm not so hot on why relaunch and add hours when there's no demand for more hours except for like a very small number of fans and not enough number that you're going to, be able to get a $50 million a year television deal out of, most likely, unless, maybe there's, maybe there's a TV station out there that goes, God damn, I wish we got AEW. And we got the same guy running AEW, and he wants to start from scratch, and we're willing to do this. But I don't know if they're going to go in there and go, wrestling's so hot, let's do it. And you know what? And artificially, maybe right now is actually a time you can do that because, wrestling is doing pretty well on television as far as the big three shows are doing pretty well. But the reality is that, the more it's going to water it down and it's going to lead to a decline. And, I don't know. And again, if somebody, there are there's a million streaming services and things like that. And also the other thing is that the other part is that it is content for whenever they do or sell a streaming service. It is another hour of content and people are looking for hours, even though I don't know how much those hours mean, but the reality is that people are looking for hours, it's just how it is. So, there's a lot of different ways of looking at it. But I just think, like, is there somebody out there that's willing to spend $50 million a year or even $30 million a year, let's just say, because, to get a weekly television show? If they are, and they go like, oh, look, he's done it with one people, I can deal with him, then yeah, more power to him, because that is a way to do this. It is, there is that possibility, but when I was thinking, it's like, Sinclair, and, those out, which didn't pay anything for it, they just kept the promotion alive, and everything, and Ring of Honor didn't grow under Sinclair, really. They grew under the Young Bucks and Cody and everything that period, and then as soon as they were gone, it went down in a hurry. So that, as far as that goes, whatever. I guess we will see about all of this.
How were the ratings for Dynamite?
It was 993,000 and 0.38. Which is, considering it went against the tournament and the NBA. The only stuff that beat it was the tournament and the NBA. So, it's, it's so funny when I just like when NXT moved, and we knew that the ratings would go up because there's no NXT on Wednesday. And I said, okay, now you have to beat the NBA every week, which is very hard, especially like if it's just a run-of-the-mill NBA game, they can beat it. But when it's like some big NBA game, they can't beat it, because NBA is much bigger than professional wrestling. And the NCAA,
and the playoffs are coming.
Yeah, well, the playoffs are going to hurt every wrestling show. They may not hurt SmackDown because SmackDown's got that big advantage of being a network show that's in different homes that get cable. So what would hurt SmackDown is if the NBA playoffs are on Friday night against them, then that would hurt. But a cable show, I mean, while it would hurt SmackDown, it wouldn't hurt SmackDown nearly as much as it would hurt Raw or NXT or AEW. But yes, the ratings are going to go down when the NBA playoffs start on those nights. And when they are down, I don't, I mean, people are going to go, they can't keep their audience, blah, 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 blah. Say it. I don't care. You know what I mean? You don't get it, but you can say it. I'm trying to teach people what this stuff means. And sometimes like they just look at the number and they don't look at the factors. Television ratings are based on your competition. Okay. That's why in a lot of ways it is so much more beneficial to look at, plus their estimates, to look at live attendance and pay-per-view, because those are real numbers. Television numbers are estimates, and they are very important because your television deal does depend on that number, and your advertising revenue in the case of AEW does. So it is a very important number. But when it goes down, you have to understand why it could and does and will at certain points. Like this week, it was lower than I expected because I thought, to be honest, on the show, I thought it was a very strong show from a standpoint of, you had the women's cage match, which is a big feud. You had the Jeff Hardy, which I thought was the key, and the six man. And the reality is that, well, the Jeff Hardy thing did very, very well streaming. It did not do that great for the quarters. So
I thought the whole thing was not good.
Jeff?
Just the Hardy Boys in of themselves. Like, when they came back at WrestleMania a few years ago, I thought they kind of looked old, but at that point you're like, oh wow, they're back again. It's WrestleMania, so you kind of like just be like, okay, I'm just happy to see them back. This time, I thought that I think Jeff can get away with it a little bit more than Matt.
Agreed.
And it's nothing against people we just talked about, getting old and all that stuff.
You have to adapt. You have to adapt. And you know what?
Putting them back in the old clothes, I don't think did them any justice.
I thought the same thing. But you know what? I think at first they should have, because you want to do that and maybe do that for, and get the quick rounds of the early nostalgia. But yes, I'll bet you that Matt already knows this today. In the sense, the long run, no, you can't be doing the Hardys in those clothes and everything like that for the long haul. But I think you want the idea of the Hardys, the legendary Hardys, against all of these teams, at least one run with, 3 or 4 of these teams, or, or at least for a short period of time. Just because it is the name, kind of like when you bring back anyone with the nostalgia thing, mm-hmm. There is a period where, you go like, oh, they're really not as good, but it always seems to work for the short period. And then you've got to, and then, yes, you do have to adapt and change. But yes, I thought when I saw them in those outfits, but at the same time, it was like, if I was in charge, I would say you got to wear those outfits at first.
Yeah,
and that's what they did. So they did what I expected, and I also expect that they will not be in those outfits forever, because they'll figure that exact same thing out.
So I guess, how did the main event do?
It wasn't like the high point of the show or anything. It declined with the women 35-49, and it pretty much stayed even with everybody else, which is, it didn't, I expected an increase with guys. Like the last time, if you remember, the match, like the show itself a year ago, because it was actually the Baker Thunder Rosa bloodbath lights out match was exactly 1 year, that St. Patrick's Day week show last year and this year. So it was really interesting to compare them, because the ratings are so much higher now than they were a year ago, like to the point of, wow, the same main event, the same promise, the big bloodbath women's match, and it did so much better this year than last year. So they are growing, but at the same time, like, did it, like last year, it increased the audience with guys a lot during that match, and this year it really didn't. It was about the same. So whatever that means, I don't know. But overall, like the match didn't move people the way the first one did, and maybe because the first one was unique and the second one is sort of a copy of the first one in its own weird way, even though it's a year later. But the company's so much stronger. I think that was my big take of like, wow, like realistically, I mean, I think it was 30s, like 35% or 33, whatever it was up. But if you're factoring in the loss of homes, it's really like 50% increase in 18 to 49s. So, I mean, it's way up. But yeah, I mean, the women 35 to 49 did drop during the match, 10%. But I expected that too. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. It's one of those things that people get mad when I bring it up, but it always happens and it always will happen. And that's the thing that, the AEW growth is unique. AEW and WWE have different appeals to men and different appeals to women. And that's just the reality of it.
Did young males balance it out?
No, they were about the same.
Interesting.
And that's where I was wrong. I did expect a big bump in that group. And overall, as far as the show, I mean, it was every demo was up from the week before, except for women 35 to 49. It was a bad week for women 35 to 49 for AEW. Coming off of a great week the week before, for whatever reason. There's always a reason. I'm not sure what it is because it's like, yes, in the last match, I can say, okay, it's the blood in the last match. I can say that. But for the whole show, I don't know why. I mean, people didn't, like, you go, well, Punk was on. Well, nobody knew Punk was going to be on or not on anyway. You know what I mean? Nobody knew he wasn't going to be on the show. He's filming Stars, by the way, right now, as we speak.
Oh, Heels?
Heels on Stars, yeah. So that's why he wasn't there, and that's what he's doing. And I don't know, it's a couple-week thing. I don't know if he'll be on TV Wednesdays or what, but that's what's going on with him. But, like, and Punk is their biggest star. I mean, that's the one thing when I was checking on the pay-per-view and who people were the most interested in and what match, and it was Punk. But Paige and Cole were second. So it's not like that world title didn't mean anything when they did their second biggest number. It meant, it was the second biggest match on the show.
Yeah, that actually surprised me because I thought it would have been Moxley Danielson.
Yeah, they were ahead of both Moxley and Danielson. And Moxley and Danielson are both bigger stars than Paige and Cole. Like, as far as, like, time, with tenure on top and everything like that, name value on top. So yeah, it wasn't Moxley and Danielson. Not that they heard it; they had a phenomenal match, and their story went to the direction it went to lead to the next direction. It was a phenomenal showcase. It was the right thing. But yes, it was Punk and MJF, and then them, and then I think Moxley and Danielson and Jericho and Eddie Kingston are. I think it might have actually been an edge for Jericho and Eddie Kingston. I might have to look that up, but I think that's what they were about the same though. It's so close that it doesn't really matter.
You also had an update on Kenny's injuries in the Observer.
Yeah, well, he had knee surgery, arthroscopic knee surgery, so not whatever, but and then he hasn't had the hernia surgery yet, and there's no timetable as far as a return goes. I don't. I don't know about Double or Nothing. I mean, I think, as far as, like, maybe the right thing is just wait for All Out and, like, have him come back a month before All Out and do something really, really big and try to use his return because, like, they got that thing of every single year, they've yet to have a show, a pay-per-view that didn't beat the year before, and every single time. This one, I thought, God, they're coming off of that, the barbed wire. I mean, the explosive barbed wire match, and I thought, like, this one, even with the dog collar match, it's not. The explosive barbed wire was something unique and big and everything, and I thought this one's going to be tough, but they beat it by, a little over 15%, about 17%. So, but the one that will be tough, I think Double or Nothing will, I'm pretty confident Double or Nothing will beat last year, but All Out beating last year, I'm not confident in at all. So they need something really big because it's going to be very difficult to match the CM Punk comeback. I mean, there's nobody out there you can do that with. It was a very unique situation.
All right, so New Japan Cup, we are in the quarterfinals, so the top 8.
Yeah. So from here on, it should be great. they have a show on Sunday, and which will be the first of the quarterfinals, which will be Okada and Shima, and then the other one will be Naito and Jeff Cobb, and then on the other side, and Okada Shima, Shima's had a good tournament, very good tournament. His match with Goto, I thought was very good, very, very strong, and then Okada is. It's weird because it's like Okada's the finishes of his matches are fantastic, but they're long, and it's weird because it's like he's had so many incredible matches with no fans and with the clapping fans, but I still think that like he's someone who needs the fans more than most, just because of the way because he works so slow, and you don't notice it normally because he paces things so perfectly, but when you don't have fans, you have to work quicker just because it looks slower unless you have fans cheering you, and then the slowness doesn't look as slow, so to speak. But Okada and Shima will be great, and then Cobb and Naito, which is interesting. I mean, Okada's going, and I would presume Okada wins that. Cobb and Naito could go either way. And, if you look at it, Naito won the last one, so you could say it's Cobb's turn. Cobb's had a bunch of big wins, and he's never had that. He hasn't had an IWGP title shot yet. Cobb also, if Naito wins, then that puts Okada in the finals because, not necessarily, but Naito beating Okada right now, after Okada just beat him, I feel it's too soon to go right back to that match, even though it is one of the stronger matches the company has, probably the strongest, actually. But I think it's too quick to go back to Okada Naito. Could have Naito win and then lose to the guy on the right side of the bracket, because the winner of this tournament is going to face Okada on April 9th. But Cobb winning over Okada, and Cobb has a previous win over Okada, and that could set up a match, and Cobb's been booked very, very strongly. So on the other side, you got Will Ospreay and Zack Sabre Jr., which is going to be a fantastic match. Zack Sabre has had a tremendous tournament. Not necessarily like incredible matches in the sense, but incredible work. His style has just been so good. Like the Doki match, that's not a classic match, but it was so well worked. And then the last match that he did, the one with Great O'Khan, I thought that match was great. And then Will Ospreay's super talented, probably the most talented guy in the business right now, if not very close. And they, every time they work together, it's just great. And then the bottom is Hiromu, Upset King, beat Evil and beat Minoru Suzuki against Shingo Takagi, who is, one of the top 3-4 wrestlers in the world right now. I don't see Hiromu beating Shingo Takagi. So I see Shingo Takagi against, and Zack or Ospreay, either one could win. Either way you could go with that one. Obviously, Shingo Takagi and Will Ospreay is perhaps the most classic match in modern pro wrestling, in the sense that every time they wrestle, it's top 4 match of the year. So that's like the big a real big thing. So yeah, from here on out, I think it's it's going to be really good. We still got the clapping restrictions, which hurts, but and it's hurt the tournament a lot, I think, because there's been a lot of matches that I've watched where I go like, man, this match is really good, but this lack of crowd noise is just hurting. So that's the deal. And then Tama Tonga, Tangaloa, and Jado were baby faces, so there you go.
Would it make sense to have Cobb beat Okada and then have him lose in the finals, because you theoretically would create 2 top contenders?
Absolutely. The idea of, but here's the thing. So then I don't think you want to put Will against Cobb. Although you could, but I just don't see that as the final 2 foreigners. So let's see. So we go with the idea that Shingo and Cobb in the finals. Shingo goes over. Shingo gets the shot at Okada, and then later Okada's next defense is against Jeff. Yes, I could see that easily, and maybe that's the best. Maybe that's the best thing for right now of any scenario anyway.
So, what was the deal with the match with Ospreay and Sonata?
Ospreay went for a standing shooting star, and Sonata was kind of moving, and he just nailed him right in the eye and broke his orbital. So Sonata's out for a while, and Sonata was out. It's interesting. He came back, did stuff, and then he was out, and the referee because he knew it wasn't the finish, he didn't handle it well. He should have just called it off. And Ospreay was kind of wanting him to call it off, and Ospreay was on top of him, just throwing elbow after elbow. Ospreay reacted very well in the sense that when he sensed it, he started doing ground and pound on the guy, so you would have a ref stoppage, so he didn't have to move the guy too much, rather than pin him, I guess. I don't, so because the pin would be weak, because to do the pin, you have to pick him up and do, he couldn't do an Os cutter. The guy wasn't going to get up. He couldn't pick him up for a Stormbreaker because he'd be dead weight. And also it'd be a terrible idea to do that to a guy with a concussion, or do, a lariat or, even, whatever. So he just tried to do, ground and pound while protecting him and get it called. And he did that and it wasn't called. Then he had to go back and do it again. And then the ref got there and called it. So it was a fantastic match up to that point, but it was a weird ending.
And then did you see the Ospreay Moxley stuff?
Yes, I did. I saw the Ospreay interview and the Moxley interview both. So that'll be a great match for sure.
So they're setting that up for the Windy City New Japan Strong show, right?
April 16th in Villa Park, Illinois, which is already sold out anyway, or just about sold out. I think it's sold out. So it's I don't know. I would want to do it in a place where it wasn't sold out, but it's a pay-per-view, so I guess that doesn't matter. And it's a good main event, though. I mean, those are the kind of matches that I was hoping, once the restrictions are over, that we would start seeing more and more of is like the big stars of New Japan against the big stars of AEW in both companies. And hopefully, as the year goes on, we can see more of that.
That the Korean barbecue line cracked me up, and it made me think of you and your PWG friends.
Oh, yeah, going to Korean barbecue.
That's how Moxley defined friendship. We went to Korean barbecue together, bro. That was funny.
Yeah. I learned Korean barbecue in Japan.
Yeah.
The first time I went to Korean barbecues with Eddie Guerrero, Big Van Vader, and Chris Benoit. Yeah. I think it's the first time I ever went. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess the last thing before, because I want to just end the show talking a little bit about your story on Scott Hall, because I thought it was really good. Conor and Usman. Conor can make a lot of money fighting guys not nearly as dangerous as Kamaru Usman.
Yeah, but it's a way to get relevancy. And I mean, I know he's talking a big game, and maybe he's convinced himself that he can beat Usman. I find that implausible. I think Usman will run him over. But I mean, and you know what? Even if he doesn't run him over immediately, and Conor can block takedowns, but it's a bigger guy. I mean, Conor may block takedowns of these smaller guys, but Usman's a better, stronger guy than anyone he's been in there with. But even not, Conor's not going to have the conditioning to go with Usman. Usman's a 5-round fighter, and Conor's not. So even if Conor's not going to knock him out or anything. So, but I mean, look, if I'm Conor, it's like, who's been drawing money right now? It's like, you can go with Masvidal, but right now Masvidal's not hot. He had a bad performance in his last fight. Him and Conor would draw, but beating Masvidal, and I don't know that he would. Losing to Masvidal would hurt because Masvidal just got beat by Covington pretty one-sided and got beat by Usman pretty one-sided. So you don't really gain a lot from that one. So go for the big one. I'm the first guy to win 3 titles and everything. They will do good pay-per-view numbers, but and if I'm Usman, I want him, but Usman said he would kill him, and I mean, I don't know. I mean, I could see Dana making it. You know what I mean? Because it's like you can go in there and go, well, it's a new division and blah blah blah. I mean, there's no, Usman's beating everybody else anyway. So I mean, there's guys on the way up he hasn't beaten, but they're not quite there yet anyway. So we'll see. I mean, Connor's looking for money and fame and everything, but coming back from that broken leg, he's not getting younger, and he's not the fighter that he was. I mean, you can see the last couple of fights, especially the last one. I mean, it's just like, it's not the same. He's not the same guy that he was like 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
I guess he did. I guess the quote comes from his YouTube show, but this is from the Brett Okamoto story. He said, "I feel confident against Usman, a jab-happy, sloppy, orthodox wrestler with no submissions whatsoever. What's he going to do? Where's the danger? I don't see danger." So that might also be part of it. Maybe he just thinks he's going to get wrestled.
Take down, get ground and pounded, whatever. He'll get ground and pounded, Usman's just way too strong for him. No matter what he does, you're just talking about different body frames.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the Scott Hall story. It was so sad, but I couldn't stop reading. As sad as it was, you had written that I guess he'd broken his hip, but he couldn't get up, and nobody knew until a few days later.
When people didn't hear from him, nobody heard. His friends didn't hear from him. They called and nobody picked up. They got concerned because he's been, obviously his drinking was really, really bad of late, and they knew it. His friends knew it. Yeah. So they were very concerned, and then they found him, and he had broken his hip. He was taken to the hospital. But yeah, and he'd been there for a couple of days lying on the ground. It's horrible. And then go to the hospital, and I mean, the whole thing of, his heart was weak. He had, a pacemaker put in 12 years ago. He all the stuff that he did, all the drinking and everything is not doing your heart any, benefit or anything like that. It was really sad. I didn't know how bad I had heard from people in Stockton when they came that there was stuff, but it wasn't really described to me in detail. And then the WrestleMania story, which I had heard that one too, but I just kind of forgot about it. He was messed up the night before, but he was good. He was really good on stage. So it was kind of like, okay, whatever. I know he's not 100% clean. We all know that, but I didn't know it had gotten as bad as it did during the pandemic. So that's, but it's a sad story. I mean, it's, there's a lot. I mean, it's just interesting to me because he, for a generation of people, he was a real, kind of like, that period where wrestling, 1997 to 2001 was the hottest period of wrestling. And while WWF at the time was the hotter company during the hottest period, the fact is that which because the real hot period would have been 99, 2000, 2001, but the company that kicked off the hot period and made wrestling hot that the WWF piggybacked off was WCW, and it absolutely was that dynamic with Hall, Nash, and Hogan and Sting and those guys as the catalyst and the thing that really brought wrestling in, and that full entertainment Nitro show, which is funny because, that is the one thing. I think that there's aspects of that Nitro show that they did that, haven't been done in wrestling in 20 plus years that I would have copied that nobody copies. And, just the vibe of the show, the entertainment, and certain aspects of the promotion of the product. and everyone's just kind of doing wrestling now. But that's another story. But I mean, as far as like, yeah, Scott Hall was a big part of it. I mean, he was just very distinctive, and he got it. I mean, he got, like, I don't know, his ability to work a camera and his knowledge of how to, put people over when he wanted to and make people think he's putting people over when he wasn't, which really was the one that, like, I was so surprised at like, oh yeah, the guy, he put all these guys over, and it was like, I'm going like, no, he didn't. I mean, he was great at not putting people over, I mean, it was, it's like, I remember watching it. I mean, it's almost like the Scott Hall thing made me, almost realize that, like, do people not get what going over is? Are people so hung up on wins and losses that they don't understand the business? Because that's what I really got out of people was like, no. I mean, Shawn Michaels got over. I mean, one of the things, Shawn Michaels was the guy who got over in the ladder match, even though Scott Hall won the first one, which is the famous one. The second one, which was almost as good, and, you could even argue was better, but it's not the famous one. Scott did lose that one. Shawn did win that one because he was on the way up to the championship at that point. But, winning and losing is who gets over is the key, and winning and losing is part of it. But if you know how to lose and get the other guy over, that's a great talent. If you know how to lose and not get the other guy over and get yourself over, I mean, that's a talent too. But it's not as beneficial in the big picture, but it's an absolute talent. And he had that talent. He could do both. He could get somebody over if he needed to get them over, like he did with Sean Waltman. And he could lose to people and go, oh, look at Scott, he's losing to people, but get himself over, but not the other guy over, which is fine too. If you're, into building yourself up, which in those days, I mean, part of being a star wrestler then it was being selfish. I mean, because no one's looking out for you but yourself. And when you're on top, I mean, you've got to be, like I say, being selfish was part of most of your top guys. Now, the key is that you can't be so selfish that you kill the company, because then you're not making any money. You've got to be selfish to get yourself over, but also you have to be unselfish, which he was at times too, to make opponents so you can draw money. Because if you have nobody to draw money with, then you got no business.
Right. So this will sort of show you when I was watching wrestling the most as a kid, the Diamond Stud character, I loved that character. And when he becomes Razor Ramon in WWE, WWF, like what I thought was like, oh, they just took the best parts of the Diamond Stud character and now he's Razor Ramon, because it was so similar to me. It was a better character, and
it was better because he got to talk more.
Yeah, and he was put in major programs
right.
early on.
He worked with Randy Savage and Ric Flair and those guys. Yeah, and with teaming with Ric Flair and everything. Yeah.
But it's funny because when I'm reading some of these things and it's talking about, Vince just made this Razor Ramon character and Vince is the guy who, I mean, I'm like, no, well, most of it was from the Diamond.
Most of it was Diamond Stud.
And then when I read your piece, and I'd also read it online about how he pitched, or didn't even really pitch the character, but like,
well, he did.
Vince and Pat Patterson didn't even really know that he was actually doing an act.
They thought he was a creative genius, and all he did was recount like scenes from the movie Scarface.
Right.
And they had no idea, because they never heard of the movie, and they never knew any of the characters. And Scott's just going in there with all of this stuff just from watching the movie and all these scenes, and they're going like, oh, you're a creative genius, and that won him points with both of those guys. And winning points with those guys at that point in time, I mean, that could make a career. Plus, he was big and had a good look, so that helped too. So yeah, they made him a superstar, and it was, he kind of knew at the end, like at the beginning, like they were really going with him and everything, but then like at the end, like I saw him where he said I had become, before he went to WCW, that I'm becoming Tito Santana in the sense that I'm the babyface that they beat to get to the main event because I have credibility. And he didn't really want to be in that spot. So, but again, like he got offered a great deal to go, especially at that point in time. And, it was the right thing. Vince did that billionaire Ted stuff. So playing off of that, I mean, that was really the ultimate. I mean, I got to say, like, sometimes there's like, in wrestling, I don't know if it's karma, revenge, or whatever you call it. But one of the real karma revenge things was Eric Bischoff using those billionaire Ted skits and and bringing in Hall and Nash and doing that feud coming off of that. That was really an incredible thing. It's almost like, it's kind of like in a similar degree now, where, like the AEW guys are kind of shoved in everyone's face. That was, Tony especially, but other guys there too, that, you'll never make it on the big stage. And, these guys are just indie guys and they only appeal to a small number of people. And, so it's like they did that now, which was kind of to me is a cool thing to watch because, and it was the same thing I thought with WWE, where they created this thing in this war, and then the other guys used it against them for 2 years. Of course, in history, who won? WWF won. So
Right.
It was only a short-term thing, and they made all the mistakes. WCW made all the mistakes while on top of not making new stars and going with the pat hand too long, and WWF lucked into Austin and Rock at the same time, and that was history. And WCW was totally, completely, mismanaged at the end to the point of like unbelievable. And unfortunately, like Scott in that period, like that was the best period of his career in the sense of, I mean, like his best matches were as Razor Ramon, but the best period of his career was there as far as notoriety went because wrestling was so much bigger. But that's when he was really having the problems and being on top when wrestling was so big and that party scene being so bad was like the worst thing for him because he got, unfortunately, when he could have been, the most successful in his career, he couldn't be because, he had self-destructed. And like even when WCW folded, if Scott was in a better frame of mind and was, physically, he would have been, what was Scott? Would have been in 2002, Scott would have been 43 years old. So that's a little on the old side, but not terribly. I mean, if he kept himself in shape, he probably could have done really well there, but he was so, he didn't and he wasn't and he was messed up. So he didn't have that, what should have been of all the guys, because Hogan was older and was, he was just older and wasn't going to work as a weekly character. And Kevin, had the knee issues and everything like that. It was going to be tough. Scott, had he been, healthy, could have probably done the best of the three as far as that, bringing back the guy, but it didn't happen, so.
So when I was first following wrestling, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, I would see Scott Hall, and I first knew him as Big Scott Hall with that giant mustache. And now this could simply be what I remember, but the presentation of Scott Hall was more along the lines of like, yeah, he's kind of missing charisma or whatever that thing is to go to the next level. And then what's funny is what actually is the big thing is the charisma. So do you know, like has he ever talked about like where he finally figured it out or who he got it from where it's like, okay, this is how I need to be?
I don't know, but like he was a student of the game. I know Kurt Hennig was a big help to him. But after Kurt Hennig, I mean, he was a guy. He was like a big guy who could move well. Who to me, was always like he has no charisma. And then all of a sudden, boom! One day, it's like when he's doing Razor Ramon, and it's like, God, this guy is nothing but charisma.
Yeah.
He's so charismatic. And I think it could be okay. Here's one of the things. It could be that because he was not being pushed past mid-level and even below that. He was just a guy who didn't talk, which was probably some of it as well. That, maybe he had it but couldn't show it. And then as soon as he got the opportunity, it was there. He certainly was, again, the only time he was really put in the position to be a top guy before Razor Ramon was in the AWA, and he wasn't ready then. And we all knew he wasn't ready, and everyone knew he wasn't ready. The idea is that he would get ready in the AWA and he'd be there like in 2 years, but the AWA was sinking so fast that, they didn't have the 2 years. And if he stayed, it would have been too late, because he'd have been, main eventing in front of 700 people, and that wouldn't have done him any good either. So, so where he picked it up, I don't know. I saw him in Japan in 97 when I was on the trip there. So I saw him several times on that tour, and it was like, the whole thing, like he was like in Japan, like he was good. He wasn't great. He was solid, like and everything. But there was, like, I could see something in him as a star, but then I didn't see it in the United States when he came back, but he also didn't get the chance. And I think that because he got the chance before he was ready, this is the terrible comparison, but I'm going to make it anyway. Chris Masters, okay? Mm-hmm. Where you looked at him, real young guy, really good physique, tall, you know what I mean? He obviously nowhere close to Scott's charisma. But at the same period, like when Scott didn't have charisma, you know what I mean? So it's like Chris was pushed way too soon, and he actually got good, but people had already given up on him as ever being a star, and he never really was that breakout star that I think he possibly could have been. Once he got good with everything. And with Scott, I think maybe the fact that he was pushed so hard in the AWA and he wasn't ready and it didn't really work. It was kind of one of those things where, good looking guy, but, he's not a top guy. And you just get that stigma. And to Vince's credit, he didn't, take that stigma and just go, he's been around. This guy's been around the business for 8 years and never been a top star, and we'll just put him in the middle. We'll hire him. It's like Vince, again. But Scott came up with that gimmick, and Vince loved the gimmick and thought he was a genius and pushed him. So that was it is an interesting thing, because people do get that thing all the time when they're put on top too early, and then it's like, oh, he can't draw. And then it's just kind of like that becomes your thing, and people just think that you're a mid-card guy. And guys get better, but if you see him all the time, it's hard. Like with Scott, the thing that made it work, I think also, is he was a different guy. If he went up to WWE as Scott Hall, and or the Diamond Stud with this, without the Cuban accent and everything and everything.
What about the Gator?
Yeah. If he went in there with one of those bad gimmicks, he may have just been, one of those guys where just a guy who, oh yeah, he wrestled for 15 years and he was a guy, and yeah, kind of good looking guy with a good body, but instead of what he turned out to be.
All right. Last question, because I love that 91 WCW stuff, because I just watched so much of it. So they were bringing in a bunch of different guys at that time in these different gimmicks. I remember Johnny B. Bad. I remember PN News. I remember Diamond Stud. Austin gets dressed up a little bit more around that time, I think, as well. It's interesting to see who came out of that. Because
Billy Jack Haynes is Black Blood.
But they all
Matt Bourne is the dancing dude with the Bears.
Yeah, Big
Bourne
Josh,
was,
Big Josh.
Big Josh, yeah.
Yeah. And so most of those guys eventually take that. Well, you're going to say Cactus Jack?
Cactus Jack made it, yeah.
But they kind of went to WWE and made it in WWE, but then Scott Hall did come back. And he became bigger. I just find that era was that a Dusty thing where he's just he's trying to create all these new stars and these just gimmicks, right? Because like that was more of a WWF thing at the time, was to put these guys into these different gimmicks. It didn't feel genuine to WCW at that time.
Yeah, that was mostly Dusty, though. Yeah. Yeah, Dusty was kind of told, we need to make new stars, and everybody thought the way to do it was to copy Vince, because Vince was the more successful, even though Vince at that time was going down. But it was one of those things. I mean, when Jim Herd ran that company, the whole thing that he tried to do and never could do, I remember talking to him and goes like, like when I look at our demos, like we're really not behind them, but they were. Okay, but I mean, TV ratings are funny because like they weren't drawing like WWF, and to me that's what you look at. Like, are you drawing? Are your pay-per-views drawing? It's like you look at TV numbers. It could be a good time slot. It could be people just watch because they're familiar because they've been in that time slot forever. But the one thing that Jim Herd would always tell me was, we're equal them in our TV ratings. Okay, and this was a TV company, so that's what they looked at. But we just get killed with kids. We can't get kids to watch. So that whole period with Jim Herd, the mentality was, and it didn't work, was we've got to get kids. So that's why they pushed Sting like crazy, because they thought Sting would appeal to kids. And that's, and that's why they did a lot of these gimmicks. And the Dusty was brought in to gimmick it up because Vince beats us with kids with all the TV characters. So we need TV characters. So Dusty makes some TV characters. So Dusty made all these TV characters, and didn't help because actually during that period, the company did total shit. They did terrible. They didn't turn it around until, 95 with Ric Flair and Randy Savage. And then, when Scott and Kevin Nash came in and Hogan went heel, obviously got even bigger.
Forgot the other big one. Oz.
Oh, yeah. I don't remember, I don't know if that was Dusty. That might have been Jim Herd. I'm trying to remember, I don't remember what it was, but it was like they promoted it like crazy. He shows up.
Didn't they have because they used to show the Wizard of Oz like all the time.
Yes.
Turner did.
Yes. Maybe. And you know what? It could have been like a tie-in or something. But yeah, I never thought that Oz gimmick was any good at all. That one was a bad one.
All right. What do you and Brian got up for this weekend? Do you know yet?
We'll be up Sunday. There's a bunch of stuff this weekend. New Japan Cup, obviously, and not a big UFC tomorrow, but UFC in London. They did break the all-time record for any event at the O2 Arena. So that's something to be with Tom Aspinall and Alexander Volkov. That tells you, I tell you what, like for all the stuff about how, UFC was always the fight and not the brand. It's like, man, it was the brand on this show. Mm-hmm. To do $4.5 million gate with Tom Aspinall and Alexander Volkov as the main event. That is unreal. I mean, that really points to the value of their brand. And like this, they're working on, every show, like the Columbus show, which isn't even a big show. It's like just a fight night. And that sold out the nationwide range. Like they're selling out every freaking show. I don't know what it is. Like before they didn't do this. I mean, the big shows would, but it's like they're selling every show and almost every one of them, like immediately. Like they're talk about on fire. I mean, that UFC, it's like they're on fire right now.
Those guys should get a cut of the house, right?
Oh my God! Did you see the Area Manual thing the other day?
No, I didn't.
So they had the Endeavor had its call, and I think it's Brandon Ross, who's on all the WWE calls, and never really challenges Vince, and was just like, a lot of people are talking about, that these fighters should make more, and the CFO actually jumped in to kind of help Area, and just goes like, fighter pay has gone up 600% since 2005. It's like 2005. Number one, that's 17 years ago. And like the company has probably gone up 2,500% in that time. And like he just comes right back and just goes, well, I think company revenue has gone up a lot more than 600% in that period. And Area just goes, we take care of our fighters. Let's move on. Just
my gosh.
Yeah, just blew it off. And the other one was Sports Business Journal. I think it was Sports Business Journal. they asked, what was it, the guy from UFC, and they were talking about fighter pay, and he just goes, "Oh, those stories, they're not even accurate." And it's like, all these stories came from the frickin' lawsuit and the records that UFC presented them. It's like we all kind of had a good idea. Like, it was always a fight because, they would always go, "Oh, they're only getting like 6% of revenue." And it's like, that's bullshit. I remember hearing that and I go, "You guys, that's bullshit. They're getting you know what I mean? They'd use those fighters. It's like, we know about bonuses. We know about pay-per-view. So we all figured it was, 13, 14%, which is still too low. And it ended up, it was like 18%. So, Lorenzo goes, "Oh, we're not far off of 50. And it's like, yeah, you're not 50. Okay. So it ended up being like 18, 19%. Okay. So now everyone's going 16, 17, 18%, whatever. And they're going, "Oh, it's not like that." It's like, yes, it is. Those are your records. We know, we do actually know now what the number is. Like they would always go, you don't know. Well, now we know. And it is too low, but whatever. I mean, it's still, the funny thing to me is like it's too low. You have a zillion stories about it in WWE, which is lower. You don't have any stories about it. And because I guess people compare them to boxers, and wrestlers, they don't compare to boxers because whatever, even though, wrestlers draw money just like boxers and just like whatever. So, yeah, but, we'll see what happens. That lawsuit's going to be interesting. Court's lawsuit. Did you read the WWE thing? Their response?
No.
Yeah, it's they McDivitt and those guys had their response to the lawsuit. It wasn't really anything that compelled me. I mean, we'll see what the judge rules. I mean, there was, the fact that the phone call to Vice that was allegedly made from WWE to keep them off, which is weird because they don't have a deal with Vice. They did get that one show after, and they were going to get a series after. It was after that call. They did one show, and then they did not do a good rating, and they were off. Okay, so that's happened. So that's a timeline thing. But, obviously with Tubi, they do have a relationship with Fox. And Stephanie allegedly made a phone call, the day they were going to, I know when they were going to make that announcement because I knew about the announcement, well ahead of time. And, was ready to, write the story. And then all of a sudden, he got to hold off. And all of a sudden, it's like, it's a dead deal. And so that one is interesting. So we'll see what the judge rules on that. But the WWE one that I thought, like, why did you write this? It's like they said, like, that MLW wasn't competent. They didn't have good wrestling, and they're trying to use this as an excuse for their failure. And they said that, like, since MLW started, both there's no barriers to entry, that are significant. So they were saying, like, there's no barriers to entry. And then they said, because look at the success of AEW, you know what I mean? And then they actually used one of the observers, which was an issue that pretty much was going through, the AEW and WWE are in a war. And it's going to be very interesting to see how it goes with a war. It was an issue from October. And, just talking about the war. So, basically they're arguing that, hey, we're not a monopoly, and they're not a monopoly, although they have a very high market share. But their thing was like, since you started, both AEW and Impact have gotten new national TV deals, so you could do it. There's no shortage of places. You're just not good enough to get one. And the thing where that is really screwed up is that Impact got a TV deal only because the parent company bought a television station. They did not get a TV. You know what I mean? So to me, it's like, if they examine that argument should never have been made, because that one can backfire in their face. Then AEW, it's like, yes, that's true. Somebody else was able to get a TV deal. So also it took one of the richest families in the country, and who had a relationship with the station over other things, and being an NFL owner and everything like that, which is still, a very, AEW's ability to get television was a series of very unique circumstances, and nobody else has been able to. I mean, that's the reality. So if you're blocking, there's hundreds of stations out there you can make a deal with. It's like, for whatever reason, there's not, there's not a whole lot of people out there trying to, bankroll Billy Corgan, who is kind of a celebrity, has a name, who's been trying to get a TV deal for God knows how long, or, any of MLW or any of these other players that are out there. Jeff Jarrett, who's always trying to do something. That's and the other rich people who look at this all the time and go see Vince's profit margin, go, this is good business to get into, until they find out that you need TV. And Tony's the only one who was able to get TV because of that connection, and also he knew what he was doing in a lot of ways, and was had understood like what talent he needed. Like for everybody else, Jeff Jarrett never could get a TV deal either. And he had tapings done, and everything like that, and couldn't sell them. So it's not like, if you have a good product, you can get a TV deal. It's like, it is very, very, very hard.
Yep. All right, so that is it. You and Brian will be back on Sunday night, and good show. We got it in. I know we didn't think we were going to get it in, but we did. So hopefully everyone enjoys it. So for Dave, I am Garrett. To everyone, thanks for